Good morning, everybody. And this is out of Yahoo. And I thought it stood out because it says New Hampshire lawmaker Werner Horn, owning slaves doesn't make you racist. And so this article was pretty interesting. It stood out to me. So I figured, why not? Because this may be some of the logic that people will use in an argument to say that they should not feel any type of guilt. So, a New Hampshire lawmaker came under fire this week for claiming America or American slavery was based on economics, not racism. So, a New Hampshire lawmaker came under fire claiming this week that American slavery was based on economics and not racism. So, Republican State Representative Werner Horn stated his case in a now deleted Facebook post, then reaffirmed his position in multiple interviews with media outlets. So Horn initially drew attention for his comments in the Facebook post by a former state House member, Dan Haynes, who posted the question, if Trump is the most racist president in American history, what does this say about all the other presidents who own slaves? So Horn then responded, wait, owning slaves doesn't make you a racist. I guess not, Haynes answered on Tuesday, so which is surprising since everything else makes someone a racist. So Horn then added, it shouldn't be surprising since owning slaves wasn't a decision um, predicated on race, but economics in a business decision. And so he goes on to say that Hannes took a different position on Thursday by Facebook, saying that slavery in the US was in fact racist. But Horn, a three-term lawmaker, now he served 3 terms, further denied racism roles in interviews with Huffington Post and the New Hampshire Union leader. So Horn told the Union leader that people have been enslaving others throughout history, calling an American institution of slavery an economic reality. So slavery later on in the U.S. South was not about color of the skin of the slaves, but their value as their workers on the plantations. So Horn told this to the newspaper. The U.S. had abolitionists since the start, people who felt slavery wasn't moral, but they weren't enslaving black people because they were black. So his his ideology is that it was just based on economics alone. It was based on economics, yes, but it wasn't based on economics alone. Because if it was just on economics alone, then how come you didn't have other groups that weren't black enslaved during the time that blacks were enslaved? And how come you didn't mix them with the black slaves? So it was based on race. You put all of the people who were from African or African descent in bondage and you enslaved them and you use them for your economic purposes. That's what basically that whole thing was. And that's where it created the skin caste, pretty much a hierarchy of who was superior, who was inferior, and who was more deemed as beautiful and more acceptable in the eyes of society. Even now, today, you still have people who struggle with the term called colorism because that's a long historical battle that has gone throughout history since this period of race racism when it comes to the slavery period. So Horn, it goes on to say that Horn told the newspaper that the U.S. had abolitionists since the start. People who felt slavery wasn't moral, but they weren't enslaving black people because they were black. They were bringing in the folks because they were available. And so there were other groups that were available, but they weren't enslaved with black people. And so I don't agree with this either. So millions of Africans were kidnapped. And you can hear that right there. Millions of Africans. Why did you pick African people to do this to? Because of who they were, and you thought they were inferior, and you looked at them as being lesser than people who are Caucasian. And even today, you still have people that are saying those things, using those tropes that one group is superior over another. And so they make comparisons all the time. And so this is the thing that has gone on constantly. And so millions of Africans, when they were kidnapped, they were then shipped to the US, where slave owners forced them to do physical labor and brutality. They brutally punished them. Those who rebelled, people who fought back or didn't want to be enslaved, they rebelled, they punished them. So black people still face discrimination related to color of their skin, including disproportionate incarceration rates and over discipline in schools. So Ray Buckley, the state the state's Democratic Party chairman, criticized Horn's comments as well as the lack of condemnation from Republican Governor Chris Sununu. And Sununu's silence on Trump's racism has sanctioned this kind of behavior from his Republican Party and has permitted comments like these with impunity. So Buckley, he said in a statement to the union leader, "It's disgusting." So, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? That you have people that believe that slavery and owning slaves was about just the economics in it of itself. It wasn't about the people. It wasn't about their skin color. When we have all these issues that happen right now today, where you have, like what they say, a mass incarceration, over discipline in schools, disproportionate incarceration rates, and you also have, you know, over discipline. And when it comes to, let's say, when you are assumed to be, or what they would deem to be a criminal, they assume that because you're a black, you're a criminal. Um, it's not to say that there aren't people out there that are doing that happen to be African American. There are some people that do things that are against the law, but everybody, the whole race, no. Looking at the whole race as criminals, that's racist. Redlining, that was based on race. Discriminating a whole group of people and trying to keep them from owning homes. And then when they were allowed to even own a home, they were overpriced in um, mortgage insurance, and or they're overpriced in rates, even in the rental market. Black people are a lot of times viewed as the lesser, and so in terms of inferiority, um, they view, like, maybe someone that is claims to not be black, or they're white or other. Um, they will price their rents a lot higher. They will do cars like that, even on a car lot. When you go to buy a car, a lot of times they will focus on the person's gender, they'll focus on, what you look like and the race, believe it or not. And you'll be priced higher on cars. Um, you can't live in certain neighborhoods, even though now it was that was something that was practiced before, but it's still practiced today. Mentally, it still goes on. It still goes on. It's not even just a mental thing. It's just practiced. It's just they've taken all the red lines out and the red pens. They've thrown all that out. Now they just know how to word things or code word things and say things a particular way. You get discriminated on your job. You get discriminated from going to certain universities. You will get discriminated when you live or try to move in certain neighborhoods if you're the only person that is black or the only family that is black or not as many families are black. And so it is based on racism. So there's a lot of things that are still prevalent that still go on that come from this era. So I disagree with the statement that owning slaves doesn't make you a racist. Owning slaves had all to do with racism because they found that these people were inferior to their race, their group, and so they felt that they would use them for the harder labor. You even had it to where they would have they would even weed out the slaves that looked like they were more desirable if their skin was lighter. They were the ones that worked inside of the home of the slave master, and people who were darker skinned worked on the fields. So it had all to do with racism, not just economics alone. With that being said, I'm going to let this video go. I just think it's sad that you have people trying to make excuses for the evils that they've created throughout time, and that's probably why they feel far removed from it's a way to feel removed from the guilt that even today, those people who know they had a grandpa or great grandfather that owned slaves, their wealth is basically built on that slave wealth. And what they were handed down in wills and in inheritance has all to do with this era. They weren't able to get into those nice schools and get nice cars and nice homes with nothing. So the wealth that they all have achieved, which they didn't really achieve fairly, and it's fair to say this, was handed down. Some people were handed down an inheritance, and a lot of that inheritance was off the backs of people that were enslaved that happened to be African people. And that's what the talks of reparation is about today. And so that's the reason why a lot of people are not in agreement with this kind of practice, because what it's saying is it's okay to brutalize people that are black. It was okay for those people to be tortured and raped and murdered and killed and their families being separated, which happened to black people. And that's the reason why if you ask some black people, they can't tell you where all of their family members are from way back in that time. But if you ask some white people can tell you I had a great great grandpa that was from Germany, or I had a great great grandmother that was from Hungary, or, as an example, they are able to pinpoint and trace their relatives. Or I had a great great grandpa who he owned factories in South Carolina, and then his what he owned, he handed it down to us, and it passed on and passed on to generations. And the factory may not have been really a factory; it may have been only slaves. That was the factory back then. And so, a lot of people are not being honest. That is where their wealth comes from. They want to make it seem as though they worked hard, and they worked hard all their life. But a lot of uh, what they've acquired was from this system right here. And so that's the reason why when you hear people talk like this, or they don't want you to talk about slavery and racism, because they know that someone in their family or somebody or more than someone participated in this system, this ugly system, and that's the reason why a lot of their being able to get a home loan, or they're being able to acquire some level of wealth or some inheritance, has been based on this system. And so, in order to dismantle a system like this, to say we are sorry and we owe you reparations, is to say that all of American people who have inherited this type of income and inherited some form of this, you have to admit, you have to be responsible, you have to hold yourself accountable for the ill wills of people that were here before you, that were participants in a horrible system that pretty much decimated many, many millions of people, who were murdered, were raped, were violated and taken by force. Everybody is so sentimental and so um, upset about what we're seeing right now, but the same things happened many, many, many decades ago or centuries ago, and people are still suffering behind that. And that those great grandchildren are saying, we've never healed from that. We have, we are a product of poverty, bad schooling, money not being put in communities, tearing down people mentally, emotionally, and physically. We're a product of that, and we have not been recompensated for all of the trauma that has happened thus far, which still is prevalent today in the US. And so everyone else has had empathy. Every other group has had empathy for their cause of whatever they're dealing with that is unjust, except Black people. People do not see this as fit to feel any type of way other than, oh, those people, that happened many years ago or many decades ago. Just get over it. Some of the things that are happening now, if you tell those people, okay, after it's over and we free you or we let you go, or we don't have these laws, just get over it. Do you think that's what they're going to want to hear? No, they're not going to want to hear that. And it's the same with Black people. We're the only people that they don't take serious. We're the only peoples that they don't want to give any money to. We're the only people that they don't want to look into what this has done, and what it's still doing till this day. It's accepted, it's normalized to be racist, to where now they have gotten so callous to it that you have lawmakers that serve 3 terms that feel that it's okay to say owning slaves was nothing more than an economic venture. How do you feel about that? I'm not surprised. With that, having said that, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.